promised you guys that we would talk about Intel Arc overclocking. I'm an overclocker, I always have been. It's interesting because it's totally different this time around. So today we're going to kind of take you for a little guided tour, I guess, of what the tools look like and what the actual performance uplift is like with Intel's Arc A770. Kioxia is proud to celebrate their 35th anniversary of the company's invention of NAND flash, a technology that has changed how we work and play. The XT6 Enterprise Data Center NVMe SSDs feature Kioxia's developed controller, firmware in its own 3D flash memory by CS flash, and feature a new set of form factors for future server and data center support with easy hot swappability. To see the complete spec sheet of all of Kioxia's developed drives and to celebrate the 35th anniversary, follow the link in the description below. So the number one rule of overclocking, well, two rules I guess, is you get plenty of power headroom, which we have. We have a 1200 watt Thor power supply, and you need to have plenty of cooling. Now the cooler, obviously, this is the limited edition from Intel, so it's got the dual fan cooler on there. Any of the AIB partners probably have beefier cooling than what's on here. So I think we're gonna kind of get an idea of what's sort of the worst case scenario. In terms of the rest of the system, I'm running an Asus ROG, or Republic of Gamers Helios case, which is massive. It's got a 360 AIO and a 12th gen CPU, 3 intake fans that are 140s, a 140 exhaust, plenty of chassis cooling. And I do have the fans on the case on max. So right now they are max speed, getting as much exchange of air as we can, because when you're overclocking, you don't want to be stifling or suffocating any of your components in terms of being too hot. So with that said, if you're running Intel's Arc, with the driver automatically installed is the Arc control. So to bring it up, it's always running. Alt-I is the default hotkey to bring that up. Fun fact, as of right now, at the time of filming this, MSI Afterburner cannot make heads or tails of the card. So that's why I'm showing you sort of how the tools work and what kind of uplift there is, because if you're wanting to overclock, you probably have this automatic sort of habit of downloading MSI Afterburner, but it can't read the sensors, it doesn't show anything. It identifies the card because the BIOS tells it what it is, but it doesn't know how to access any of it. So Alt-I, it's up and it's always running. We've got a few different tabs here like drivers. You can have it automatically install drivers and such. It looks very much kind of like Radeon software does. Looks very similar to like how GeForce Experience is. It's more of a GUI or a graphics user interface rather than just being a sliders and such like you find with MSI Afterburner. Games, you do have game profiles that you can create. If you go to performance, this is where we can start monitoring everything happening here with CPU, memory utilization, GPU memory used. And if we hit this little button right here, the little graph, this then brings up a very similar looking graph to MSI Afterburner. The problem is it moves very quickly. You can't go back beyond. See, in MSI Afterburner, you can stretch out the timeline and you can go way back as far as the system's been on, essentially. On this, you only get what's accessed right here in this little like 30-second or maybe 1-minute window. I hope they come out with a way to configure that, because you can't. And the problem is some of the runs that I'm doing, if I go back and look at it, I want to see farther back than just the last minute of what I was doing. But it will at least monitor what the max, what this number up in the top right here is the utilization and such. But it can keep tabs of what the max peak was of whatever these numbers are. And then if you hit the little gearbox right here, you can uncheck the stuff that you do and don't want to see in the metrics. But I find that most of this stuff's actually pretty useful. If you want to see all this up in the corner without having to see this all the time, you check this box here that says in-game overlay. Again, if you hit the gearbox on that, it's the same things you can toggle on and off with hitting performance tuning, or the gearbox up here on live performance monitoring. So if we turn that on, you can see it pops all that information up in the corner. So let's say we didn't care about VRAM clock. See, it just goes and removes it. So you can customize what you want to see. And this is all very important when overclocking, because you want to keep an eye on everything. What I love is the fact that it shows VRAM temperature on there as well as VRAM effective frequency and VRAM temperature, because oftentimes you don't get to see the RAM info. And that's important too, especially when we learned when we were doing LN2 overclocking, RAM temperatures were very important to keep tabs of, because sometimes that's the reason why we were crashing. Studio, this is a completely separate from overclocking. This is basically like GeForce Experience or even Radeon Relive. Is it Relive? I thought that was it, but it sounded weird. Anyway, we're not gonna worry about that today. We're worried about performance. The settings are interesting. They're not traditional. What I mean by that is GPU performance boost. Adjust voltage and frequency characteristics to improve performance while staying within the same power limits. It just says 0 to 100. 100 what? I don't know, I haven't played with it yet. We're gonna find out today. Voltage offset, pretty standard. You have up to 245 millivolt offset, or 0.245 volts. That's a lot, actually. And then power limit. I like that they show power limit in wattage rather than just showing a number of additional percent. So this is why I said in my review, all of the figures that you saw in those performance numbers were at the 190 stock wattage. This is very similar to if you max the power limit on an NVIDIA GPU. The only difference is NVIDIA GPUs show you a percent. So if 190 is 100%, 228 watts would be whatever that 38 watt difference is, or the ratio or the math of taking 38 watts divided by 190. So that's the percentage difference. I don't know what it is, I don't care. So we could max that, and then temperature limit's already maxed at 90. Actually a pretty low temperature overhead versus both AMD and NVIDIA. That's all you get. You don't get much right there. We'll do Shadow of the Tomb Raider first. And we're gonna do this without RT. I don't want Intel's RT accelerators, or whatever they're called. I forget, too many names now, to be a factor here. I just wanna see what the raw transistor performance is like. We'll be doing this at 1440, because as we already know, it is a beefy 1440 card, and it's an okay 1080p card. So we're running DX12, because we know that ARC does not like DX11. And DX9 is even worse because it's actually running that as an emulator, which puts a lot more overhead on the CPU. XeSS is off. I'm doing a whole separate video about XeSS versus DLSS. Everything here is looking pretty standard. We're running SMOF anti-aliasing. We're putting a lot of load on the GPU on purpose. The preset is custom. We're going highest, and then we are turning ray tracing off. Pure hair, normal, and then everything here is pretty much standard HPAO. Okay, cool. So we will go ahead and run the benchmark. What we're gonna look at up here is GPU clock. We know 2400 megahertz is the max boost clock allowed without touching any of those sliders. There's 2400 megahertz, 71C on the GPU, 190 watts on the GPU power. So as you can see, we are hitting both the wattage limit and the clock limit. And you see it clocks down to 2350 as that power limit starts to be pushed. So it's bumping up against 190 watt. The only way it can stop it from trying to draw more wattage is to momentarily reduce the clocks. And that's how it works in all turbo/boost logic, whether it be AMD, NVIDIA, or Intel. So as it's moving up and down to 2350 to 2400, and it looks like the steps in here, the binning steps, is 50 megahertz, which is actually pretty drastic. AMD is able to do it pretty much in single digit increments. NVIDIA actually used to be 13 megahertz, and now it's like 7 megahertz. So the finer tuning you can do like that, the more performance you get. It's interesting though that Intel is doing it 50 megahertz at a time. But like I said in my review, it never got hotter than 75C. As you can see right here, it's sitting at 73C. It's actually doing really well for a fairly small cooler, especially one that we can't control the fan speeds on. I would love right now to just max out the cooler fan, but I can't. So there's 74. And right about the time we get to 75 is where we will notice, oh, there's 2300. So we've lost we've lost about 100 megahertz now over this run. And that's again because of that 190 watt limit. We'll let the test finish, we'll see what the results are, and then we'll start playing with some sliders and see what happens. I'm still curious as to what that GPU performance boost slider is. I don't know if that's megahertz. I think it's megahertz, I just don't know. It could be 0 to 100 of the allowed overhead, but if it doesn't define it, how do you know what it is? All right, 87 FPS is our average there. You can see we are pretty much entirely GPU bound, 100% GPU bound right there. All right, so let's start seeing what's gonna happen here. Alt-I. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna max the power limit to 228 watts. You can see the 90C still hasn't changed. That's all I'm gonna change right there. We're gonna run it again and see what kind of effect this has. Given the fact that it spent almost the entire run at 2400, if it doesn't go above 2400, I would expect there to be very little change. Yeah, see, 2400 megahertz, same temperature on the GPU, and the wattage, as you can see, even though we're allowing it to go to 228, is staying in the mid 190s, and that's simply because we've now hit a GPU clock limit. And that's why the temperatures are effectively unchanged, only about a C higher because we are allowing about 5 to 7 more watts. So now, as you can see, we're only pulling a couple extra watts, and all that's doing is allowing the 2400 megahertz to stay constant. Fan speed sitting at just around 2,000 RPM. I don't know what the max RPM is on these fans. Because again, Intel, give us fan control. That's important. You give us an RGB header, give us fan control. So 75C, 2400 megahertz, 76C. 205 watts was the hottest, the most I saw it pull. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna touch the voltage. I love this built-in overclocking tool, by the way, because I can just bring up the overlay and make changes and go. I can even do it while it's running the test. That's awesome. Whereas like Afterburner is a separate app you have to go back and forth with. I'm gonna go 50. The reason why I'm gonna do 50 is if the clock speed goes up 50, then we'll know that that's what's changing. Did it just crash? Did not like that. This is also why I do not have apply settings on system boot checked. It's also very important not to do that because if the settings are not even stable for the desktop, you will have a hard time getting back to the desktop unless you go into safe mode. So I don't feel like that. Okay, that's just a warning saying if you overclock, you're gonna break your stuff. And they're not responsible, but that's what we do. So I don't think GPU performance boost, I don't think that's megahertz, because I feel like it could have done 50 megahertz. So if I just do like 5.
Oh, 2462. Geez, that slider's really sensitive.
Yeah, Phil made the joke that what if that's times 10? So 50 was really 500, which now looks to be about the case. Okay, so 5 really is like more than 50 megahertz. So what is, oh, you can type. What is 2? 2411. So it's a ratio of some sort, about 6. 2200, 2465, 10. Would 10 be 100? 2451. What?
What down?
Wait, what? Wait, 5 was more. How is 5 more than 10? Oh, voltage offset. Okay, there's 1120. 2474. Yes, so we were, okay. We were hitting a voltage thing there. So we were asking for more clock than the voltage would allow, so that we were hitting a voltage limit, it looks like. Let's just run this and see what happens. There's 2474. And then our voltage came up to 1120. So now we know 50 was like probably like 500 megahertz. Now I can do this. 2479. 2467. Wait, what? 2521 on 8. What? I want to know what it is that we're changing. I don't know. It's just like, I don't know. It's like when I don't know. 2517. If I go back, what have I done like 15 on the voltage here? I'm trying to control, oh yeah, see, voltage limit, it dropped down to 2482, 1142. We'll just max it, see what happens. 1107. So maxed out at 0.245 volts. It's not going there, but maybe the frequency isn't asking for that. Oh, no, we're maxed out on the wattage. That's what happened. The sliders allow you to go way more. See, like we're maxed on wattage, right? That's why I won't go any higher than 2500. So let me pull that back down to like 40 now. This is our number one limiter right here, is our wattage. It's like tightrope walking on this. Because see, look, every time I bump the millivolts, I get more clock out of it. Watch, now 15 to 20. So it's at 2482. That's 2526. If I go 10 right here, is this balanced here? I'll go 10. 2526, 2531. So you have to find this balance between having a little bit extra voltage headroom, or no, wattage headroom without too much voltage to get more core clock. It's a Venn diagram on overclocking. It always has been. It's just, we're really limited here. We went from 87 to 90. There's 3 FPS at 1440. I'm just gonna let it run again, because I want to do a little tuning here. So plus 20 millivolts seems to be, like now is where hooking the air conditioner up to would be fun, because you saw the correlation earlier in this video between temp and wattage draw. So keeping it colder would be better. So we're at 218, 219, 2531, oh, 2502. Yeah, see, it just pegged the wattage, that's why. So let's go back down to 10. It's 2531. So maybe here I go 18. No, 5 millivolt increments. Yeah, it looks like 11 at 20. 2502. Nope. 15. Yeah, 2524 at 210 watts. It's so weird. Like we can't. I really wish we could push this number more because we have cooling headroom. We have 14C headroom. That's something that probably will require an AIB. Honestly, AIBs will probably allow it to go up to like 2050 or 250, I bet you. But that's about it. That's as much as we can get out of it because as you saw, it knows when the voltage, well no, because allowing the voltage to go up allows the power draw to go up, which means we're hitting the power limit again before we're hitting our instability number. So that is 124 megahertz above where we were. So I'm gonna close this, I'm gonna exit the run, and we're gonna restart right now, this run, and we're just gonna let it go, and I'm calling it now at like 91 FPS. So that'd be a 4 FPS increase at 1440 by moving some sliders. All right, as the test is ending, 2524, there was 1 second there where it went all the way down to 2400 and then back up to 2524, but it stayed locked there, which is funny because it was at 81C, and it was at like 117 watts, so which means we had almost 10 watts available to us, 90. So not pushing it to that limit is not getting us like this huge benefit. It's one of those things where, to be honest, what I would do if it were me, right? I would reset these to default and I would just go maxed out on that. And then I would go like 3 on there and that's it. That's all I would do. So I'm gonna run that again, but not doing all this fine tuning, just with a 3 Intel units of overclocking with no voltage offset, leaving the temperature limit at 90, and then seeing what that does for our performance. So locked at 2400 the whole time, 88. So, I mean, we would have gained 2 FPS with that extra amount of time. Until the custom cards are in hand that hopefully will allow a higher wattage limit, which all it takes is a better cooling design and better BRM design, theoretically, to increase those. We're probably not gonna see any real tangible gains with trying to overclock the A770. For me personally, like I said, I would just push the power limit all the way out to the 228. That way it's not having to dynamically control the frequency and lose 50 megahertz at a time, because that's a huge bin change. You'll get more consistent performance that way, and then the cooler clearly is able to handle it. I mean, it's at 81C right now because it's nice and loaded up in that case, but 80C is still 15C below, or excuse me, 10C below the 90. I keep calling it 95C limit. I'm used to I'm thinking AMD right now. So 10C, we still have plenty of headroom there. I'm not too concerned with that temperature. All right, there you go. So that's a look at Intel Arc Control. Lots of information to look at, just not complete yet. Give us fan control, define this a little better on exactly what's happening. You know, and you can use it to kind of, see, this is the problem. I'm moving the mouse on this and I'm changing settings in the background because the overlay coming forward doesn't take control of the mouse priority. It's still doing stuff in the background, so I don't like that. So performance optimizations, right? So if we go back to recently played, like it doesn't even show Shadow of the Tomb Raider up there. So there is no performance profile there. So there is one for Port Royal, and that was off, obviously, when we did our stuff. So enables an application-specific performance profile that takes full advantage of your graphics product's capabilities. It takes advantage to give you better score, but may not work in stuff that uses scores. Lots of buttons and knobs and stuff. I just highly recommend while you're in here screwing around with stuff, learning how to use it. Do not turn on apply settings on system boot. Make sure it's all working and stuff. Oh, and another feature I'd love to see, Intel, profiles. Once you start to get overclocking, that actually matters. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hope this explains some information on how to use Intel Arc's limited overclocking capabilities, but they're there. We'll revisit this again when we get some of the beefier AIBs that maybe have more overclocking headroom. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.